So I'm going to start and quickly introduce myself. I'm Jennie Monness. I'm one of the founders of Union Square Play and new mom resource called Mo Mommies, which have since kind of become one and the same. And I'm really so thrilled to be here talking with Dr. Karp all about sleep and everything he's created. And I just want to thank Hatch for making this conversation possible and co-hosting it with us. And Harvey, I can definitely introduce you, but I feel like I wouldn't do it justice. So I'm going to let you do it yourself. Tell us who you are
No.
for anyone who may not know.
Okay, well, I guess the important points, I'm a Sagittarius. My favorite color is blue. I think that about covers it. I'm a pediatrician and a child developmentalist. I took care of babies and families for almost 30 years in Los Angeles, where I did my training. I did actually the training in New York at Albert Einstein, and then out here at UCLA and Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. And then I started to kind of, through my 30 years of work, I observed some things that hadn't really been talked about, like how do you calm babies? How do you promote sleep? How do you help toddlers be more patient and cooperative? Things that are important in everyday life, and yet some very simple things that had escaped the general understanding. And so I started writing books about that, and we made videos, and we've trained thousands of educators teaching this in 20 nations. And then a few years ago, we launched a new product that I built with MIT engineers and a leading designer, which is a bed called SNOO, which is a responsive baby bed that can add 1 to 2 hours to a baby's sleep by imitating the womb experience that babies have. But it also keeps babies secured on the back. We're very proud. We've measured almost 100 million hours of infant sleep, keeping babies safely on the back for the first 6 months and preventing, reducing bed sharing, which is a danger. So we're hopeful that we're going to eliminate 90% of infant sleep death. And most importantly for parents, what SNOO does, since it's a responsive bed, is it's really actually a caregiver. It's kind of like your older sister moved in and said, you know, Jennie, you go to sleep. I'm going to hold, rock, and shush the baby all night. And if the baby gets upset, I'll rock and shush a little bit more. And if I can't calm the baby down, I'll come and get you. So for parents, and especially during this COVID terrible crisis, when parents are more isolated than ever, SNOO is an extra pair of hands for them. It's a 24/7 caregiver. And we rent them for under $4 a day, ship them for free. So it's really about the cost of a Starbucks coffee. You can have more sleep, safer sleep, and a 24/7 helper. So that's one of the exciting things we're doing now. And one last thing I'll add to that, which is the goal is not just to help new parents who more than anything deserve the help and need the help, but our goal, as I mentioned, is to prevent infant sleep death. We're doing studies to show that we can reduce postpartum depression and anxiety. And that's especially poignant this month because it's International Maternal Mental Health Month. And our goal is to reduce child abuse and to improve breastfeeding outcomes and all the good stuff that you want to do when you're having a new baby.
Thank you for that. It's really incredible what you've built. I
Thank you.
especially love your perspective on the fourth trimester, and I share it with my mom's groups. But before that, I read that you actually coined the term. Is that true?
I wouldn't say I coined the term the fourth trimester. That was around before me, but I have popularized it because
Right.
before people were going like, hey, my mom tells me I shouldn't pick up the baby all the time because that's going to spoil the baby and get them used to getting anything they want. But then I hear from these attachment parenting people that when you pick up your baby and you meet their needs, that builds a stronger sense of confidence and trust. So people get confused. And you know how it is. There's the mommy wars, right? I hear this, especially you go on the
Right.
internet, you get bombarded or whiplash. And in truth, you don't want to spoil young children. And when they get to be 9 or 12 months, you have to be consistent and you have to set limits and you have to be loving, but strict when you have to be strict. But it turns out in those first 3 or 4 months, you don't have to worry about that. What babies learn in the beginning is trust and confidence and attachment. And so meeting their needs, even if you hold your baby 12 hours a day, from their point of view, that's a ripoff, right? Because you used to hold them 24 hours a day just a week ago. So you
Yeah,
have to
we're all
recognize
very
that,
concerned about bad habits in
sure.
those first few months. So that's
Yeah.
especially why I love sharing that, your perspective on that.
Yeah, and you still have to pay attention to bad habits. And so children are learning all the time, and we can talk more about what's a good habit and a bad habit with babies and what to get them used to. But in essence, you want them to know that you will always be there for them. And that becomes the basis of them trusting anyone and developing intimacy later in their lives, that feeling of security.
And yeah, so my goal in sharing that perspective with them is to kind of alleviate that kind of obsessive concern with bad habits when it comes to holding, rocking, shushing, and kind of simulating the womb. I know for me, especially, I believe in philosophies that kind of encourage your child to learn these tools. And so in the first few months, I was very fixated on it and would talk to my mentors about this struggle I was having. And they're like, oh, don't even, that's like, for the first 3 months, it's about survival. And so that's really kind of how my perspective changed, because I think just like our babies, we're embracing this new role also, whether it's for the first, second, or third time. And
Mhm.
our babies are learning how to kind of be outside the womb. And so in addition to the fourth trimester and all you've said about that, you've described babies as sort of being born too early or too soon. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, of course, as a pregnant woman, you're ready at 9 months. I mean, you're ready at 8 months or
Yeah.
7.5 months, right? The last month or
Way
two is not.
before that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But the baby isn't ready at birth. I mean, it's a tight squeeze, right? Getting them out. You can't really wait any longer than that. But it takes 3 or 4 months before babies do the number one most important thing that a human being ever does, which is to develop the dance of social relations. You smile, I smile, you coo, the baby coos back, and you play that beautiful little game, which seems like a silly little nothing, but it turns out to be the most important thing a person ever learns, because we are all dependent on social relations. And ultimately, you don't want to have a relationship with someone who doesn't know the give and take of communication, right? Me, only me, talk about me, see you later, and they never ask you a question. That's not a very sustainable relationship. And so babies are learning this concept of serve and return, give and take, reciprocity. And that doesn't really start happening consistently till 3 or 4 months of age. So for those first 4 months, you are one big walking uterus. You hold them, you rock them, you shush them. And even if you do it 12 hours a day, from their point of view, it's a ripoff, because you should be doing it 24 hours a day. It's one of the reasons why we created SNOO, so that here's one of these things. You talk about bad habits, and people are told, don't always rock your baby to sleep. Don't always nurse your baby to sleep, because then they'll get dependent on that. And that's a very weird misconception in our culture, because it turns out that when babies are in the womb, the sound is louder than a vacuum cleaner, 24/7. Rum, rum, rum. And in addition to that, they're constantly rocked. Every time you breathe, the diaphragm is rocking the top of your uterus and rocking your baby. And of course, during the day, there's lots of jiggly motion. And they're constantly held in this little bundle. They're never flat on their back in the womb. So we give birth, and then we put them flat on the back, looking up at the lights, no sound, no motion. We make it even quieter, tiptoe, everyone, the baby's sleeping.
Right.
It's taking away every sleep cue your baby ever had. And then we wonder, why isn't my baby sleeping better? Well, you could sleep on a cement floor, but you're not going to sleep well, right? If I took away your bed, pillow, mattress, blanket. So we need to give babies the cues that they're already dependent upon. And then around 5, 6 months, you can wean them off of those when they're much more mature and ready to do that. But this concept, and I want to talk just because a couple of words you used were like obsessed and fixated and worried, and parents are concerned. And it turns out there's good reason for that stress, because parents are doing something today they never were meant to do and was never done in history. Parents need to really pat themselves on the back, because up until 100 years ago, and for the entire history of humanity, you didn't have one nanny, you had 5 nannies. You had your grandmother, your aunt, your older sister, your next door neighbor's older daughter. You had an entourage helping you. Women today have very little support, and they don't think they deserve it. They think that a real mom does it all herself. Awake all night long? Sure, I'll do that. That's what a real mother does. That's a lie. That's not what women would do. Of course, you have to be there for your baby and should be there for your baby. And even waking up in the middle of the night is actually a beautiful thing when everyone else is asleep and you get to cuddle in the quiet of your bedroom. But not when it's happening every hour. That's not so pretty anymore. That gets kind of tragic. And so it's important to recognize that women and men deserve help. And what they're told right now is that, well, listen, babies don't sleep a lot. You just got to suck it up and deal with it. I mean, they're not going to sleep well till they're 5 or 6 months. And besides that, some babies have colic, which means that they're screamers, which means that they are going to have periods when no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to calm the baby down. Just put him down, let him scream in the other room and close the door. And the old saying was to put cotton in your ears and gin in your stomach to be able to deal with that. Any book you read will tell you that's normal. But what if that's not normal? What if that's wrong? What if that's a complete mistake? We've made mistakes before. It used to be when I started as a young pediatrician, we were taught that babies should only sleep on the stomach. We thought sleeping on the back was a risk. They would vomit and choke. Turns out we were completely wrong. Babies are much safer on the back than on the stomach, and they choke less even. Well, it turns out that if you drive your baby all night long, they'll sleep an extra hour or 2. They'll cry less. It's just what they do. Even you will sleep more if you're driven all night in the backseat of the car or in a train or in a plane. So who says we can't help babies sleep better? We can help them sleep an extra hour or 2 from the very first week of life if we give them the rhythms that they're used to in the womb. And then come 5, 6 months later, we wean them gradually off of those rhythms so they're ready to sleep by themselves, in a crib or some other setting. And so it's really important to understand that you, as a mom, most moms and dads today, most parents today, have very little experience taking care of babies. They have very little support and very little personal experience. So we're doing it because we think it should be pretty easy, and it is easy. It's not rocket science, but it's technique driven, and you need to get help learning how to breastfeed. It's not automatic, and you need help learning how to rock and shush a baby. It's easy, but it's not automatic, which is why we made a video. And it's funny, I'm an author who, I like my Happiest Baby book, but I really recommend that people watch the 30-minute video, which they can get on our website or Amazon. But just like learning how to tie your shoelaces, you learn to be a master of baby calming and sleep by watching the techniques, not by reading about them in black and white.
Totally. I mean, I remember when I first got home from the hospital, we didn't have anyone to help my mom, that first night. And the next day, I was lucky enough where we had a nurse come, and she started shushing and rocking and doing like this whole song and dance is what I thought of it in my head. And I was like, I was just like kind of blown away and felt like, oh no, is she disrespecting the baby by shushing her? And, it kind of was my anti-approach right before my eyes, working beautifully. And so I asked her, like, what is this? I really thought she was doing this whole kind of like seance thing. And she told me about the 5 S's, which I wanted to get into next, because I think it's inspired your whole SNU, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And I've since embraced fully, especially, like you said, in those first few months, and how we're trying to really ease this baby into the world in not such a cold way of going into this warm womb to on their backs and with no movement or sound. So what are the 5 S's? I don't know if it's too long of a question, or how you can share more about it with us.
Sure, you bet. And again, there's a lot more written about this on the internet and on our website, so people can learn more. But in essence, if you understand that babies are born 4 months too soon, um, then imitating the womb experience kind of makes sense. And it more than makes sense. It turns out that when you imitate the womb, you're not just making them feel nostalgic for where they used to live, but
Right.
you're actually turning on a reflex. And so that's why you have to learn how to do the 5S's in a very specific way, because like a knee reflex, if you hit the knee with a hammer and you're off by 2 inches, it looks like you're doing it right, but it'll never work. And even if you hit the right place, if you do it too softly, it won't work. There's a very specific way of doing it. And with the 5S's as well, they'll only work when you do them really kind of in the sweet zone. So the 5S's are 5 ways of turning on this calming reflex and imitating the womb experience. The first is swaddling with the arms down. And we can talk about swaddling for quite a bit longer and why it's arms down and not arms up. But swaddling needs to be with the arms snug down for 99.5% of kids and the hips loose. And you want it safely around them so they don't unravel. The second is and we actually now have a swaddle that the New York Times rated as the best swaddle in America, called the Sleepy, which is a 5-second just zip up swaddle. So the second is the side or stomach position. The back is the only safe position for sleep, but it's the worst position for calming a crying baby. So if the baby's fussing and you want to soothe the baby, you roll the baby to the side or stomach. And then the other S's are shushing or white noise, swinging or rhythmic motion, and sucking is kind of like the icing on the cake. Now, it turns out all babies, 99.5%, like I said, will benefit from swaddling for the first 4 months or so. But we don't want babies sleeping. If you're not in the snoo, you're safe. You can safely swaddle for 6 months because the baby is secured and attached to the bed, so they can't roll over. But if you're not using snoo, you want to stop swaddling at around 2 months of age because you don't want the baby rolling over swaddled. That's a risk for the baby. So it turns out that babies do best in the beginning, especially with swaddling, but then some of them really love sound. Others, sound doesn't matter so much, but the jiggly motion matters. Other, it's sucking, and some you need combinations of these. So in the first few weeks, you're just learning your baby and figuring out what works the best. And once you do that, you've figured out what will always work the best for that baby. It'll stay consistent.
Yeah. So what do people, well, before I get into that, how has the 5S's kind of, been the muse of the snoo? And then in addition to that, people who asked questions wanted to know the right time to transition out of the snoo. I'm only touching on that because you were talking about rolling over and
Mm-hmm.
first 6 months is safe. But what about when your baby does roll over and kind of is in showing that they're not comfy like that anymore?
Sure. So a couple of things. So as we, for more than a decade, teaching the 5S's all across the country, parents were telling us, that's great, that works all day long, but what do I do at night? And you're putting a baby down in this sensory deprivation tank, essentially, a flat, quiet bed. And even if you have white noise, it still is missing that motion, that rhythmic motion that babies and really all of us find so nurturing. And so that's when I decided that we needed to make a bed. And I thought it would just take a year and get it out and be easy as pie. And it took about 8 years to work through that and develop it. And because we wanted to build a bed that didn't just rock and make white noise, but it responded to the baby. And also we want to make a bed that lasts millions and millions of hours, because we didn't want to sell $1,000 baby beds, although we sell them for $1,200. Because they're expensive to make. But now we rent the beds for just under $4 a day, because our goal is ultimately to get insurance companies and the government to subsidize this. We already have over 50 major corporations that provide this as a benefit for their new parents. So if any of you work for large companies, tell your benefits managers that they can provide this to you. And in fact, it will save the company money. It doesn't cost them money because they'll save so much on recruitment and productivity and reducing errors, accidents, and healthcare costs that it's literally dollars in the pocket for the companies. So this directly was the muse for building SNU. And in fact, we are imitating the womb, or we're imitating the best grandmother or baby care provider. I mean, obviously we can't feed the baby and change the diaper, but we can not just rock and shush, but we can respond to the baby. 50% of the time the baby cries, we calm the crying within a minute. And 50% of the time we don't, meaning that the baby's hungry or needs help. And we add 1 to 2 hours to sleep. On average, by 2 months of age, babies are sleeping on average a 7-hour chunk, and many are sleeping 8 or 9 hours at a chunk, which was never even thought possible before. And yet we still have excellent breastfeeding rates. We have about 65% exclusive breastfeeding at 3 months of age. So we're able to really be the support for parents. And ultimately, the goal and expectation is that everyone will get to use a SNU when their baby is little. And then when they get to be about 5 or 6 months, babies are much more mature and they don't need the help. Now, see, one of the questions parents are asked is, how old is a baby when they sleep through the night? And some people say 4 months or 5 months, but the real answer is never. Babies never sleep through the night. Children never sleep through the night. Adults never sleep through the night. We all wake up 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night. And when we wake up in that very light waking, we usually dive right back into sleep and we don't even remember waking up unless something is wrong. If your pillow's on the floor, you smell smoke, or something is wrong, you'll wake up and you'll remember that. If everything's okay, you'll fall back asleep and you're probably not even going to remember. So with babies, if you rock them and shush them until they fall asleep in your arms, and then you ease them into the bassinet, when the baby wakes up in the middle of the night, they're going to go, wait a second, where'd everybody go? And so there is truth to saying that you're getting the baby in a, quote, bad habit, or anticipating this problem. However, it's the most beautiful thing you ever do, rocking your sleeping baby in your arms and nursing your baby to sleep. So we can't tell parents not to do that. But if you then ease the baby in the bed, you're going to be setting up bad habits, if you will, or incorrect expectations. So what do? If you have a SNU, it's not a problem, because when the baby wakes up in the middle of the night, they're being rocked and shushed, and so it's as if you're still with them. But if you don't have a SNU, you should have white noise playing, the right type of rumbly, low-pitch white noise. And what you do is, when you place the baby in the bassinet, you wake the baby up, which is kind of dumb sounding. But if the baby has been fed, they're kind of drunk from the milk, and they're swaddled and have white noise, then sometimes you just have to jiggle the crib a tiny bit and get them to fall back asleep. And that starts to get them to learn to be better sleepers. With SNU, at 4 months, we start weaning them from the swaddle. So the swaddle blanket has little armholes, so you can start trying an arm out. And actually, if they have an arm out and they whack themselves in the face and they start waking themselves up again, you put the arm back in and wait another few weeks to try it again. So usually by 5 months, babies are have the arms out of the swaddle, although they're still attached to the bed, so they can't roll over. Because the peak age of rolling over and SIDS is 4 to 6 months of age. That's the scariest time. 2 to 4 months of age is the scariest time. And by 6 months, it's over. And then by 5 or 6 months of age, there's a weaning feature on the app, and you can start weaning them off of the motion. And so by 6 months, they're fully ready to be sleeping in their crib. Usually, we sleep train babies automatically. We don't have to do any crying it out.
Yeah, I have to tell you a secret. I got the SNU from a friend, and it's my second baby. And so I kind of got it as a just in case. And we never used it or turned it on, and I regret it. I did end up having a baby that had reflux, so I want to ask you, because someone also asked, who are the 5% of babies that don't need to be swaddled with arms down, or are there extenuating circumstances where your baby just, it wouldn't resonate? Like, I think the SNU might have calmed my baby, but then by the time she came out, I would have maybe noticed this reflux later. I'm not sure. We don't need to talk exactly about that, but are there circumstances or cases where it just wouldn't be the right fit?
Pretty much no. is the answer. I mean, are there babies who don't like to be held, rocked, and cuddled and shushed?
Right.
I mean, so, but I will say this. So, a couple of things. Number one, for reflux, we actually improve reflux, and babies with reflux do really, really well because they get little feelings in their stomachs, and that can disturb them. But if they're being rocked and shushed, they're much more likely to fall back asleep. If they're in a totally stone quiet room, not moving on their
Right.
backs, they're more likely to wake up. And so what we see is that we sleep train babies, but we also set up better sleep habits. So by 6 months when they graduate from SNU, they're in a much better kind of predictable pattern of sleep. So they become good sleepers, if you will. Who are the ones who it doesn't work with? So it turns out there are 5 S's. Like I said, some babies love sound, some love motion, some babies love sleeping on top of you. They hate being on the back. And with these babies, we oftentimes have to change the settings of the bed. We have to have it a little bit faster so they're not paying attention to being on their back. We have to have the sound a little bit louder, or we do a couple of other things. And we have 7-day-a-week customer service to give specialized sleep consultations so that anyone who has a SNU, if it's not working perfectly, I would say 95% of the time it just works. Push the button and it works. But 5 or 10%, you need a little extra help. And so we encourage everyone to call us to get, speak with a sleep consultant to get some special help to make it work. I would say there are very few percent of kids who so hate being on the back that they won't put up with it. Trouble is that if you sleep them in bed with you or on a sofa,
Right.
you're dramatically increasing the risk of infant death. So that's really what's the scary part. So best is when you start SNU right after birth, immediately, or even for premature babies. And it can be beneficial even at 1 to 3 months of age. Once you're getting over 4 months, it's probably, you've really passed the point of trying that out. And then when you use it, people use it for 5, 6 months, sometimes 7 months. But you want to use it as much as possible. It's so funny in New York, and I'm a New Yorker originally, but New York City is the only place I find people trying to have them out of the SNU during the day and in the SNU at night because they don't want the baby getting used to it.
Right.
And they don't recognize the baby is used to it from being in the womb 24/7. And so when you're confusing the baby with different exposures, it actually makes it harder for the baby to figure out what's going on. And it's not at all a problem by 5, 6 months to wean the baby off. And I would say it's interesting because we never have this conversation about feeding, right? You feed your baby milk, 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 always milk, 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 milk for the first 6 months. No one really goes, oh my God, I've only given my baby milk. Maybe he's never going to eat food. It's just going to happen when they're physiologically ready. And the same thing is for sleep.
Thank you for that. And I still regret not using it. By the time I wanted to, it was like that 4-month time, and I was just trying to be
For your third.
Right, totally. I'm gonna tell my husband right now. So I mean, not everyone has the SNU, and right now, especially, during quarantine and COVID, we don't have the support that we've maybe would have had otherwise. Do you have words of advice? I mean, you said yourself you can't do the 5 S's throughout the whole night. I don't know if there's probably not some magic recipe of what to do.
The things you can do, you can do the best you can. So you can use white noise, and you can get free white noise off of our website, which is specially engineered to reduce the intensity of the sound. We have millions of people visiting us every month just to get information. So you don't have to buy anything. It's all free information for you about toddlers, about babies, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit about toddlers in a minute. But you can use white noise, you can use swaddling for the first couple of months. But I would say, honestly, the majority of people can afford a SNU. They can rent it at least for a couple of months so that they're getting more sleep and getting help. And like I said, we ship it for free. It's just a 1-month minimum. So, honestly, some people have the idea that, oh, this is a very expensive thing. And it really, if you get 2 hours of sleep, you're going to save money on coffee. and that's going to pay for itself. So really, it's not going to be any money out of your pocket, essentially. And so I would encourage people not to believe the hype that this is too expensive. And again, it's not a bed, it's a caregiver. Hey, if you hired a 14-year-old to hold your baby 1 hour a day while you cook dinner, you'd pay 15, 20 bucks for that. So for less than $4 to have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, holidays and weekends included helper, it's actually the biggest bargain you can get. It's a much better value than a stroller or other things that we do spend money on for babies. So I encourage people to really consider that. And they're not locked in. You know, try it, and if you don't like it, you can send it back.
And do you feel like we should start a routine, so SNU or not, that we should start a routine or schedule right from the start, you know, right when they get home from the hospital?
Yes and no. I mean, flexibility is a help. It kind of depends on how many kids you have. I find that if it's your second or third or fourth kid, you're definitely going to be on a schedule because you have to have some predictability in your day. And the other kids need predictability as well. When it's your one child, it always feels like this is the hardest thing you've ever done, and you're exhausted, and you, no one told me how hard it was going to be. And then you get a toddler and you go, oh my God, the baby was the easy part. So
Right.
it is funny how that changes, but a flexible schedule, I would say. So during the daytime, I would wake the baby up. I wouldn't let babies sleep more than an hour and a half, 2 hours at the most. I'd wake the baby and do a feeding. And then at night, I'd let the baby, if the baby will go up to 4 hours at night, that would be great. But longer than 4 hours, I'd wake the baby up, especially while you're establishing breastfeeding. Formula-fed babies, it's a different story. You have much more flexibility, and you can let them drive the schedule. I would say two things about feeding babies, just because calming, crying, and sleep are important, but breastfeeding is also really important, and so many people struggle with that. Um, Two kind of bits of advice. One is, if you haven't had the baby yet, oftentimes the OBs don't ask you this, but it's very important to know that when you stimulate your nipple, it erects like a half an inch or so. It should not be flat or inverted, because when your breast fills with milk, if you have a flat nipple, it's going to get even flatter, and the baby won't be able to latch on easily. So if you have a flat or inverted nipple, there are things we can do to get that pulled out, but you do want to speak to your doctor or midwife or nurse practitioner about that at this point in time. And then the other thing is breastfeeding is very natural, but it's not necessarily automatic. As many people run into problems as people who just have smooth sailing. So don't just take it for granted. Study, learn, go on the internet, speak to a breastfeeding consultant, get some suggestions now, get a doula if you can get a doula help, and they even do teledoulas now. So try to get support so that you don't spend the first 4 days suffering and then get into problems that are much harder. It can be painful, it can be frustrating, and a few little tips can make it so much easier. So reach out. Don't be a Spartan about it.
And I think that goes for sleep as well, you know, that when you know, we spend all this time focusing on the pregnancy and then we have the baby and we're like, now what am I supposed to do? At least I felt that way when it came to sleep. I knew all this stuff about early childhood development, but I didn't know what
Mhm.
expectations to have around sleep. And so people have asked, you know, when we collected questions, how much sleep should we expect from babies before, you know, the 3 month mark, when when a lot kind of it comes together, you know, is it too much to expect these long stretches? Do you recommend sleep training at a certain point?
So there's lots of mysteries about sleep, and actually I wrote a book about sleep also called The Happiest Baby Guide to Great Sleep for the first 5 years, because it's not just babies that struggle, but toddlers as well. And most parents are just told to let the baby cry it out and shut the door. And not that that can't work, but it feels pretty brutal. And there are ways that you can usually finesse it where you don't have to go, you know, cause, an hour of screaming. Um, I would take exception with what you said, that usually by 3 months things are getting better, because actually things tend to fall apart at 3, 4 months. There's something called the 3-month sleep regression, which is when babies are waking up to the world, and when they wake up in the middle of the night, they're going, let's play, you know, you with the long hair, come back here.
I
And
more
so
mean that pediatricians say that you shouldn't sleep train before that. And yeah, I just more meant that it's kind of like all over the place before that. But yeah, it continues beyond.
it is exactly, you're exactly right. It's all over the place. And here's the interesting thing. Back 50 years ago, we actually knew very little about breastfeeding. We've learned a tremendous amount. There have been so many studies published, and so many educators and lactation consultants that have come around. Sleep and crying, it's still the dark ages. And I have to say that most doctors and nurses still don't realize that, that the old advice that some babies just cry and babies can't be taught to sleep is incorrect. They think that's what they learned in school and that's what they teach. But again, it can't be right, because if you drive them all night in the car, they're going to sleep an extra hour or two. So we know that we can help babies sleep better, and we can reduce crying, and we can do it immediately, really in the first week or two of life. Period, end of story. So the mystery is solved. The information is there. Anyone can learn it, and anyone can be the best baby calmer and can help their babies sleep longer. And they don't have to use snoo for that. They can get some help with white noise and swaddling. But you have to swaddle correctly and safely. You have to use the right type of white noise. There are some particulars. And with using snoo, it kind of is all built in. So you just press the button and it just kind of works. And most importantly, you also keep the baby safer. So 3,600 babies die in their sleep every year in the United States. And to put that in perspective, that's more Americans than died in 9/11. And that's happening year after year after year. Now, in 1994, 25 years ago, we realized we were stupid. We doctors, we were saying sleep on the stomach. It turned out that was wrong. They have to sleep on the back. Immediately, we dropped the rate of death from 6,500 a year to 3,500 a year. Almost 50% of babies were saved. And we thought, well, that's really great. Pretty soon, another couple of years, it'll be down to zero. But since 1999, we've made zero progress. 3,500 deaths then, 3,600 deaths now. We've completely failed as a culture. Why? Two reasons. Number one, parents are either ignoring us and putting the baby on the stomach, or the babies are rolling to the stomach, or they're bringing the baby in bed with them or onto a sofa. And that's where the deaths are occurring. And parents are doing that just because they're exhausted. Because usually when you institute a public health measure, you have to prove two things: safety and efficacy. If a medicine is safe, but it's not effective, who cares? It's water. If it's effective, but it's not safe, it's poison. You need safety and efficacy. When we started back to sleep, we recognized the safety of it, but it turned out it was the opposite of effective when it comes to sleep. It actually ruined sleep for babies. As a result, parents are exhausted. They bring the baby in bed with them because they don't know what else to do. And then they read on the internet that some cultures around the world sleep with their babies and blah, 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 blah. It turns out 60 to 70% of young babies who die in bed with their parents. It is horrible. Your life will be scarred. Your baby will be dead. It is the worst possible thing to do. And it happens accidentally, but have a bed right next to you. Have a co-sleeper or a snoo right next to your bed and put the baby there safely. Then you're not taking a risk. So you can have a baby close to you and nurse your baby, but not take the risk of having the baby in bed with you. What we're seeing now, like I said, we've measured 100 million hours of infant sleep. It's never been done before. It's never even been thought possible before, where we keep babies safely on the back. And so we believe we're reducing the risk by 95%. That alone, forget about sleep, that alone, that insurance benefit of snoo is worth a couple of dollars a day all by itself. But I think it's important for people to understand sleep and understand sleep cues and the use of white noise. And understand, it's not that you can't do sleep training, and some people recommend it even at 2 months of age, but there's no culture in the world that thinks it's normal to let your baby scream on the other side of a door, your 2-month-old. It just doesn't make any sense. Not that it can't work, it just is contrary to everything that you're there to do with your baby. And if you wait a little bit and you let the baby mature a little bit, by 5-6 months, they're really ready to be good sleepers.
Thank you for all this wealth of information. We talked a little bit before this started about how, and you mentioned it here, that no one sleeps through the night, and that including our toddlers. And then also there's those babies or toddlers that wake up very early. So can you just, and I know we don't have just unlimited time, talk about what to do with early risers, especially, I know it's normal when they're babies, there's not really a cohesive wake up time, but people who have 1-year-olds or toddlers are asking about that. And then also you mentioned to me that you have kind of a whole program for toddlers, which was news to me. So I'd love for you to share that with everyone. And I'm muting it because my daughter is calling for me, but she's safe and okay with
Let her join us.
that.
So, okay, well, a couple of questions there. So the first question is about I forgot the first question. Actually, it's about
Sorry.
routines.
Yeah. There's a few questions that came in, so for those who asked them. But I asked about early risers.
Right, early risers. Okay. So, so there are genetic predispositions that all of us have to be either night owls or larks, we call it. So larks are early risers, and night owls like to stay up at night. And that's just kind of the cards you're dealt. And to try to stretch it out a little bit, so to get them to wake up at 6 instead of 5:30 maybe, there are a couple of things you can try. One thing is to darken the windows. Some kids wake up even before the sun comes up, so that doesn't work very well. Using white noise is important. So when you look at sleep cycles, there's deep sleep and light sleep. It goes like in waves of the ocean. But as morning approaches, those waves get lighter and lighter and lighter. They're starting to dream more. Most of our dreams occur in the 3, 4, 5 o'clock hours of the night. And so think of a dream as a kind of a conversation in our heads. So if the young child is having this conversation in their head, they're more likely to wake up and think that they're having a conversation with you or want to have a conversation with you. And so if you have rough kind of loud white noise playing about as loud as a shower, that competes with their own internal conversation. And so sometimes you're lucky, and just using white noise alone helps them to sleep an extra half hour or 40 minutes or so. It's not going to do more than that, but it'll help stretch that a bit. And then as kids get older, there are special alarm lights. When it goes green, it's yellow means you have to stay in bed, and green means you can come and get mommy. And so there are other signals you can give children in their room to help them understand. And you can sometimes lay out things for them, like a bottle that they can have in the morning that they can reach out to, so they can be a little self-sufficient and not have to bug you right away, or some toys they can play with, and things like that. So those are things that are steps in the direction that sometimes help those kids who wake up so early. Making sure the room is not too hot or too cold is another thing. Having a teddy bear or a blankie or something that they can snuggle with so they're not alone is another kind of a tip. And then when it comes to toddlers, so the key concept with babies is that babies are born 3-4 months too soon.
Dr. Karp, before you do that, there was just some baby questions, and I know you wanted to talk about, or we wanted you to mention all your knowledge with the toddlers. Can I just quickly ask you just a few of these because they seem quick? Someone asked about the swaddle being comfortable and worried about the restraining of the movement, but is that why you said you make it loose in the hips? And
yeah, the whole idea that, I mean, you wouldn't want to be swaddled, right? But you wouldn't want to live in a uterus for 9 months either. And babies do very well with that. That's why most cultures around the world wrap their babies very, very tightly. Hips you want loose because it's healthier for the hips. If the hips are very tight, you can cause a strain on the hip joint and even arthritis later on. So you want hips loose, and you want the arms very snug. If the arms are loose, then the arms are getting out, they're whacking themselves in the face, and it becomes kind of counterproductive. So babies struggle against swaddling. So you might think, my baby doesn't like it. Well, your baby doesn't get a vote. Your baby really doesn't have that discretion yet, because once the arms are out, they're going to whack themselves in the face. And even though they want it, they're not really mature enough to handle it yet. So with rights come responsibilities, like I like to say, and babies aren't responsible yet to have their hands out. Again, that's 99.5%. There's every once in a while a baby who does better with their arms out, but it's really rare and far and few of those kids.
Is that also with the babies who like their arms up in those swaddles?
Yeah, so in the womb, the arms are up, but within a week or two, the arms start to relax. And so right away, when you wrap a baby, you're forcing their arms down and you think, my baby doesn't like that. But you're misreading what is the normal physiology of the baby. Because once you straighten the arms and they relax into it, you do the rocking and the shushing, they usually completely relax into it and they love it and they do very well with it. Once they get to around 4 months or so, that's really when they're wanting to suck their fingers. They're better at doing that and they want an arm out. And so with SNU, we have these armholes and you can liberate 1 or 2 arms. And then you see sometimes they want the arm out, but they're still not able to handle it. They're waking themselves up every 2 hours, which is not a good thing. So you kind of have to test it out along the way.
Great. And then you can't share the SNU if you have twins, right?
No, it's not safe. You have to have an individual one for each baby. We've had quintuplets in twins. It's been very cool. And in hospitals now, we're using it in hospitals across the country, in the nursery and in the mother's postpartum room. Women can ask for that because that is like a caregiver in the room with the mother. And that way you don't need the nurses coming in and out as much, which everyone's concerned about now with the virus. And if you don't have family members who can join you, that becomes something that's a support.
Can some babies outgrow the SNU in terms of their physical size before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's possible. We built SNU to the 97th percentile of a 9-month-old boy, but it turns out some kids are bigger than that. But most of the time, parents think they're going to outgrow it, and they don't. In other words, if you look at a growth chart of a baby, once they're born, they're rocket ships. They're shooting up with their growth really fast, and then it plateaus. And so a 3-month-old looks like they're never going to last another week, and then they still go till 6 months. And so occasionally we see kids outgrow it. It's fine if their feet touch the bottom. That's not a problem anyway. Obviously, you don't want the head rubbing against the top, but it's very uncommon that we have kids outgrowing it before 5 or 6 months.
Okay, great. And then the last question, there are a few residual ones and we'll make sure to answer them offline. The 5 S's, does that differ depending on the mom's behavior when the baby was in the womb? Is that why you kind of get used to the rhythm of your own baby?
No, it's really, it seems to be a biological preset. So some people just like white noise and they do better with it. Some people, they just fall asleep in the car every time they're in the car. And so
Right.
There seem to be some presets that are inherited from their parents.
Okay. Yeah, and then people asked about like the owlet and pacifier and things that I can maybe write to you for the answers.
Well, I'll give you some quick answers. So owlet is fine. It doesn't promote sleep, but it does measure heart rate and oxygenation. What we're trying to do is prevent problems. In other words, owlet will go off when the baby stops breathing. What we're trying to do is keep the baby from stopping breathing. So, however, it doesn't mean that that's a wrong product to use, and some people use owlet with SNU together. Sorry, the other question was pacifiers. So pacifiers are a great tool. Some kids are like, the pacifier is the key. I mean, they just relax when they suck. And so they can suck at the breast or a bottle or your finger or a pacifier. And then at 6 months, if you want to, you can just get rid of it. By 6 months, it's a pretty easy time. They're not so psychologically dependent on it the way a 1 or a 2-year-old will be. And listen, it's not a terrible thing if a 1 or 2-year-old is on a pacifier, because they'll give it up by 3 years or 4 years of age. And so it all works out. I worry much more about thumb sucking. And if you don't give a pacifier, kids will start sucking their fingers. That's something you can't break them from later on, and that becomes much more damaging to their dentition. So pacifiers are a fine tool. Don't worry about it, and then just kind of disappear it at around 6 months.
Okay. Yeah. And for those asking about like advice for getting babies to nap without being held or worn, I think it goes along with what you said about really working to transfer your baby, uh, you know, sooner than later so that they get used to sleeping, that you don't transfer them in their sleep, right? Drowsy
Right.
but awake.
Right. So put them down. Asleep is fine, but then immediately wake them up a little bit, jostle them a little bit. Use white noise, use swaddling in the first 2 months. And those are the best tools you can use, or a snoo. Those are the best tools.
Okay. And are the sleep specialists from the SNU website free? Like some people, their baby's already a month and they want to make sure it's not too late or just ongoing support. Or can people
That
ask?
is free. That is free for people using snoo. Yeah. And if you have questions about snoo, of course, you can ask those as well.
Okay, great. And then before we go, Harvey had mentioned to me about toddler help. And I think even if you have a newborn and you're not going to benefit right now, it's something that I wish I knew about. So I just wanted him to leave us with that. So yes, tell us.
So let me tell you a couple of things about toddlers. And when I say toddler, I mean starting at around 7 or 8 months. So it's earlier than you think. Toddling means walking with poor balance. So they're starting to toddle at around that age. Going up to around 5, 6, 39, 84, 93 years of age, something like that. Because ultimately we all become toddlers if we get upset enough. And so these are communication skills that are useful for all little kids who are nonverbal and bigger kids as well, because all of us become nonverbal when we get upset enough. And so there are two kind of basic concepts that people have to understand. The first, with the baby stuff, we talk about the fourth trimester. If you understand your baby's born 4 months too soon, then it makes sense all this other stuff that you're doing. Toddlers, the key concept is that toddlers are not little children. Toddlers are cavemen. They're Neanderthals. They are unfrickin' civilized. And your job as a parent is to civilize them. And I'm not saying this, in any disparaging way. They're cavemen were very fun, happy-go-lucky. They used to sing and dance around the fire or something, I don't know. But they're cute and fun, and they eat ice cream and it's all over their face and it's really adorable. But they're not good roommates. They don't clean up after themselves. They're not polite. They lose their patience. They spit and scratch when they're upset. I mean, that's normal. And so the reason for understanding the fourth trimester is then you have appropriate expectations of yourself and your baby. The reason to understand that toddlers are uncivilized is so you have appropriate expectations of what you're going to accomplish, which is, yeah, they'll say please and thank you. It's cute when your 15-month-old goes, please, mommy, but don't expect it all the time. And by 5 years of age, you do expect them to say, please, thank you, wait in line, share their toys, be patient, and all those other good things. But it takes a while for that to happen. So you don't want to be overly judgmental of yourself or of your child for that matter. And you understand that they're going to flip out, they're going to have temper tantrums. But just because you raised a baby, and this was the joke I was telling you about before, so many parents I talk to, when they're having a baby, they'll buy 10 books about having a baby. Not that they read the books, mind you, but they have the books and they feel like a good parent because they bought the books. And then never buy another book the rest of their child's life, which is insanity, because really those first 4 or 5 months, you're going to get through it one way or another. But between 8 months and 5 years of age, you've built a person. And if you haven't built them well, they can get better with years of therapy. But how much better is it if you've kind of built them to be emotionally resilient and confident and have good intimacy skills and communication skills and patience and delayed gratification and all those things we want our kids to learn and respect. But just because you've seen a 2-year-old in pictures in a magazine doesn't mean that you know how to raise a 2-year-old. You're not instantly the best child care provider or preschool teacher who ever lived. But it's not rocket science. There are techniques that will make you the best preschool teacher who ever lived. And so with the baby stuff, there are the 5 S's that you have to master. With the toddlers, there's another group of like 10 or 15 very simple techniques that work in a day or two that help your child be more patient and cooperative. But the basic key concept, I would say, one of the most overriding concepts is the idea of the fast food rule and toddlerese. The fast food rule being, how do you speak to someone who is upset and acknowledge feelings? And toddlerese is, how do you translate your words into a language that toddlers understand? Because if I were to take off the top half of my skull, you'd see 2 halves of the brain, the right and left half. It would look like a walnut, kind of. Right now, we're doing adult speaking, right? You think this is adult kind of communication. So probably I'm mostly talking with my left brain to your left brain, which is the adult side. The other one is the emotional side, the kid side. But actually, if I were really talking to you in adult language, I would be speaking to you like this, and you would be gathering information that would be very helpful in terms of your being able to raise a child who's emotionally resilient. I mean, we don't speak like that, right? Even though that's left brain information, which is language, logic, problem solving, delayed gratification, we have to mix it with right brain information, nonverbal information, emotional information. My gestures, my tone of voice are the Post-its that I put on my messages to say, this is important, this is what I want you to remember. And with young children, the left brain doesn't work well at all. They're not good with language and logic and problem solving. They're excellent with their right brain. A 9-month-old will not understand if you say, mother is sad. But if you're crying, your 9-month-old will grab you and try to console you. So they get the concepts. Sign language is a great thing to teach to a 9-month-old, a 1-year-old, a 15-month-old. Way before they can learn to say words, they can learn to sign 15, 20, 30 words. And so it turns out that what you say doesn't matter as much as the way you say it. So this gets to probably the biggest mistake I think parents make of toddlers. We all now are taught to acknowledge feelings. And we think that that means when a child is upset, we go, sweetheart, come, I know you, listen, I know your ice cream fell. Honey, I know your ice cream fell. We're going to get you another one. It's very upsetting. I know you're unhappy. Just calm, sweetheart, calm down for a second. Sweetheart, take a breath, calm down. Now, to successfully acknowledge feelings, it's not the words you say that matter, it's the way you say the words. If you were upset with me, and I said to you, that's very upsetting, Jenny. I understand why you feel that way. I too would be upset. I mean, honestly, the words don't matter. You hang up the phone and think that I'm a freak. If I don't say any words and I go, oh no, oh my God, Jenny, wow, oh no. That's not very eloquent, but it feels right. And so parents need to know that your words are important, but when your child has high emotions, or anyone has high emotions, that's not the time for words. And it's the time for nonverbal communication. So if I'm going like this to a child, what is that telling them? It's saying, shove it in. Mommy really doesn't want you to express your feelings. And the kids grow up saying, you know, listen, either they grow up screaming, like, this is the only way I could get my mom to pay attention to me, or they grow up thinking, you know, even my mother, I mean, she only wanted me to be happy. She never really wanted to hear my feelings. I don't know. No one really cares about my feelings. And it becomes a very, very dangerous and unsupportive position to be in. And so toddlerese is how you express emotions to someone who's upset. There are 3 steps: short phrases, lots of repetition, 6, 7, 8, 10 times of repetition, and then mirroring a third of their emotion. Not all, but a third of their emotion, and your tone of voice and your gestures. And what's really cool about this is that parents, the first time they do it and they say, you're mad, you're mad, you're really mad, you're unhappy and you're mad and you don't like me right now. Parents go, I don't know, that feels weird. You want me to be an actor, or it's baby talk. It's exactly what people would say in your experience about shushing a crying, newborn. Shh. I don't, that feels like I'm saying, shut up. That doesn't feel right to me. Well, yeah, but if you know you're imitating the womb, that's why it feels right. And for toddlers, what's so cool is that when your child is very happy and excited, when they do something for the first time and they come to you and they're beaming with success and want to share that with you, do you say, very good, mother is proud, I will tell father? Or you go, wow, wow, look at that. Wow, good job. Look, you did that. You tried and you were. We use toddlerese automatically. When children eat breakfast and they're happy with that and they're enjoying themselves, you don't say, did you enjoy breakfast? You go, yummy, yummy, yummy. That's so good. You know, we always speak to children like that. And when their brains are turned off with emotion, we have to repeat ourselves more and use more kind of nonverbal communication, because we're communicating with the right half of the brain, which is the only half that's there. But there's a ton more very practical, very different counterintuitive techniques that you can practice. There's a video with this as well as the book, and we have a lot of information on our website about this, so that you can be, what I like to tell people is, you know, take 5 hours, watch 5 hours less of Game of Thrones, and spend it learning about how to be the best, you know, mom or dad you can be, parent you can be for your toddler. And it will be time well spent that you will use with your 7-year-old and your spouse and your mother-in-law as well.
Well, I hope we get another chance to talk about that, because that is just very much in my wheelhouse and I love that. Thank you so much. And not that I didn't love this. This was so great. And I do mean it when I say I wish I used the snoo. She's sleeping now, but it was a long road. And
well, I hope people join our Instagram at Happiest Baby, or visit the website, happiestbaby.com. And there's a lot of free information, and you'll see what other parents are saying as well.
Great. Yes, I was going to ask where we could find you. So thank you for that. Have
Super.
a great rest of your day. Thanks to everyone who
and a happy Mother's Day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Jenny.
Bye.